As any person starting out in a racing game will know, it can sometimes be difficult to know the best car to buy at any given time. Now, releasing a list like this almost a full year after Gran Turismo Sport has been released, in fact, one day away, it was released tomorrow in fact, at the time of releasing this video, this isn't necessarily the most applicable countdown out there. And that is a strong argument. That's actually one of the reasons why I hadn't done it myself, because you win so many cars in the game on a daily basis, and also the fact that there are less cars which don't take as long to earn all of them, and also the fact that the FIA integration is more of a thing now. It's not as applicable a list as it would have been in, say, GT6 for instance. However, if someone at least can benefit from it, or maybe just some of us like to know what cars are fast for a low price, then it's still worth doing the breakdown. So this is my personal pick of the 10 cars that I would say are the best in the game in terms of being really good, really competitive, and really high performance with a lot of tuning potential, but for a really low, beginner-friendly price. Now the price that I've set is 30 grand. So all 10 of these cars are 30,000 credits or less, which really is dirt cheap. So the first 5 cars are in no particular order, and then the last 5 are my top 5. So let's get straight into it. Kicking us off first of all then, I'm putting a pretty acceptable car. It's exactly what you'd expect, it's just under 30 grand, and it is of course the Abarth Fiat 500. It's everything that you'd expect it to be. It's small, it's thumpy, it's fun, it's funky, the handling is good, front wheel drive chassis of course, the power is decent enough, the performance that it gets from the power is very good, and around N100 to N200 it's a pretty good little track car. It's not going to blow your mind, but it's certainly a good place to start as far as this list goes. Next up I'm putting a car which is very easy to overlook, but it's always been a part of the franchise, the Mazda MX5, aka the Mazda Miata, aka the Mazda Roadster. This one isn't necessarily as useful, you could argue, as it used to be in the franchise. There were so many of them before, but this one's actually pretty good. It's an entry-level drifter that's very affordable, it's one of the cheaper cars on this list. It won't blow your mind with its performance, but it's a nice entry-level sports car. Next up we have the cheapest vehicle on the whole list at 16,000 credits, the Suzuki Swift Sport. Very likeable car, similar to stuff like a Mini Cooper or the Abarth, or one of my personal favourite hot hatches, the Fiat Panda 100 HP, but unlike some of those, this one's in the game. And of course that's a big advantage when you're talking about a racing game, actually having the car in it. It's kind of important if you're going to buy one. Now for that low price you get around 120 horsepower, of course you can detune it, you can tune it up, have N100, N200 capabilities. Again, like the Abarth, it's not the fastest thing out there, but for me personally, I would actually say that this is a better car than the Abarth because it's cheaper, it's just as quick if not better, and personally I happen to think it's a better looking car, although of course that's subjective. Next up we jump up the power band a little bit to around 200 horsepower with technically 2 different options, and this is again at the time of releasing this video. Who knows if we'll get Scion back in the game, probably not, but you never know. And this is of course the Subaru BRZ or the Toyota 86. Now technically the Toyota is actually almost 1,000 credits cheaper, and this one is right on the line, it's exactly 30,000 credits. Personally I prefer the Subaru, even though it's a little bit more, I like the look of it more. Both cars are essentially the same in terms of performance, and across the board they're strong little contenders. Kind of like if you cross something like a Clio RS with an MX5. It's got that small sports car, rear-wheel drive attitude with around 200 horsepower straight off the bat, and it is a fan favourite. Plenty of people do love these cars. Next up, one of the more oddball choices you could say, the Toyota FRS. Just like the Subaru, it's bang on the line at 30,000 credits, but it's a funky little car. It's not quite as cool as the racing version, which is an absolute monster, but this one is really good through corners as well. Again, N100 capability, N200, even higher potentially depending on how heavily you tune it. It's fantastic through corners. It's still not as quick as some of the other K cars in N100, so you do need to bear that in mind. Perhaps more surprisingly than you might think, this car isn't really any quicker than something like a Honda Beat or a Daihatsu Copen, which of course are also in this kind of price range. So overall, this one's got the weirdness factor and the tuning potential goes way higher than they do, which is the main reason why it's here and they're not. Next up, we're making a big jump as far as the vehicles on the list, way up to around 250 horsepower with a full-on, iconic, very successful and very popular hot hatch in its newer form, the Ford Focus ST. It may not be an RS, of course, but the ST is no slouch, and technically the ST has been more prolific than the RS, because some Ford Focus generations took quite a while to even get an RS, whereas the ST became a staple of the brand and of the model in particular. This one's great. It's on the upper end of the scale, you could say, just under 30 grand, but for that, you know exactly what you're going to get. It's a really powerful hot hatch, and I might add, it's pretty much the best hot hatch in the game if you're looking for bang for buck, because it's less expensive than stuff like the Mercedes A45, it's even cheaper than the Citroen DS3, it's even cheaper than the Peugeot 208, which is kind of insane, but it's a really good hot hatch. Now moving into my top 4, kicking us off first of all in 4th, perhaps surprisingly I'm putting it above the Ford, which is strange given that this is an N100 car to begin with, only around 60 horsepower, a K sports car, be it one of the newer ones, the Honda S660. So why am I putting this so high? Well, put simply, it's less than 20 grand, and it's pretty much the fastest N100 car out there. It's incredibly quick, it's around 4 or more seconds quicker than any of the other K cars around Dragon Trail. Any of you guys who watch my breakdown of the rivals match between them will have seen that and probably remember it. It's a car which I personally don't like that much, I prefer the older K cars. But what is not in question is how useful it is. This car is very, very competitive, and in the lower levels, it's pretty OP as well. And now we move into the top 3, the 3 golden children, as far as I'm concerned, the cars which offer incredible all-round value, even at the start of the game. Kicking us off in 3rd, the Toyota MR2. Yes, believe it or not, you can get a Toyota MR2 with around 200 or more horsepower very easily, especially with tuning. It's essentially a mini Ferrari, if you want to look at it that way. I've always thought it looks like a mini F355, and the value is fantastic. It's 27 grand. You can tune it up, you can tune it down. The handling is a little bit more challenging than some, in a similar way to the Honda S660 before it, but overall, I mean, this one's a no-brainer. It's a great little sports car with way more power than most of the others on this list. It's mid-engine rear-wheel drive, and of course, any time that an MR2 of this generation shows up in a racing game, it's always one of those cars that shocks you by just how quick it is, and this is no different. Now, moving up into the most difficult decision of all, my 1st and 2nd place pick. Ultimately, though, I decided to put this one in 2nd, but this is a strong 2nd, and for some people this car may be number 1, the Mitsubishi Evo 4. Yes, believe it or not, for exactly 30 grand, you can get around 270 horsepower, all-wheel drive, 1300 and whatever kilo curb weight, which is fantastic for a sedan, rallyability, tons of grip, it's very forgiving, and it's an Evo, so it kind of has a lot of cred behind its name, and for good reason. There is no equivalent old-school Subaru in the game currently, but if one did come back, it would probably be a good rival for it in terms of price. This one, though, is fantastic. For beginners, for pros, it can appeal to everyone. What, though, about in 1st place? Well, in 1st place, I'm putting this. The Mazda FC RX7, and now you can probably understand why it was a difficult choice. Yes, the Evo is fantastic, it's more powerful, it has all-wheel drive, but this Mazda is everything. It's got the whole package. For a start, it's cheaper than most of the other cars here at 24 grand. It has around 200 horsepower to begin with. You can detune it to N100, you can tune it up to N500. The performance is fantastic, around 180 miles per hour on sports tyres here at Fuji. The handling is a little bit more tail happy, of course, depending on the power, but it can do whatever you want. It's a good drag car for the power, a great drifter. You can use it off-road, on-road as a circuit car. It's cheaper than most, as I said. It's just the whole package. It's a little bit more pro than the Evo is in terms of the driver level, but they're interchangeable. They're both fantastic. So of course, if you want to check out tunes and reviews for most, if not all, of these cars, you can click through at the end of this video, and of course stick around on the channel for more like this. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.